My name is Mark. I'm 39 years old, and until a few months ago, I would have told anyone that my marriage was comfortably boring. Not exciting, not passionate. Definitely not the kind of marriage people write Reddit posts about. Just normal. Rachel and I had been married for 11 years. We had our routines, our favorite takeout places, our inside jokes, and our unspoken agreement that whoever finished the milk was legally required to pretend they hadn't noticed it was empty. Marriage isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's arguing over whose turn it is to take the trash out while simultaneously asking if the other person wants anything from Costco. That's romance after 35, and honestly, I liked it. Maybe that's why this whole thing hit me so hard. You don't expect your life to explode on an ordinary Tuesday. You expect that kind of thing on anniversaries, or Christmas, or at least after someone says, "Honey, can we sit down for a minute?" Instead, mine started because I got home early. My afternoon opened up unexpectedly, so I figured I'd surprise Rachel. Maybe we'd grab an early dinner somewhere. Maybe we'd binge-watch another terrible crime documentary where every husband is suspicious within the first 12 minutes. I pulled into the driveway and noticed Rachel wasn't inside. Her car was there. The front door was open. I could hear voices coming from the backyard. One belonged to Rachel. The other belonged to Linda. Now, every neighborhood has a Linda. She knows everyone's business before they do. If your Amazon package arrives at 2:17, Linda somehow knows by 2:14. If someone gets a new couch, Linda knows how much they paid. If a couple argues with their windows closed, Linda can probably tell you who won. She wasn't a bad person, just professionally curious. Rachel had become pretty friendly with her over the last couple of years. They'd have coffee together, gossip about neighbors, complain about HOA emails nobody actually read, and discuss things I assumed I'd be happier not knowing. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. In fact, I was carrying 2 grocery bags that were cutting circulation off to at least 3 of my fingers. My only goal was to get inside before a jar of pasta sauce declared independence. As I walked up the side path toward the front porch, their voices carried through the open wooden fence. I caught Linda laughing. Then Rachel spoke, calmly, almost casually. "You know," she said, "I think it's time I started looking at other options besides my husband." I stopped walking. Not dramatically. Not because I chose to. My body just stopped. Like someone had pressed a giant pause button. One grocery bag slowly slipped from my hand and landed on the grass with a soft thud. Neither of them seemed to notice. Linda chuckled. "Oh, come on," she said. "You've been thinking about it for months." Rachel laughed. Not nervous, not awkward. A real laugh. The kind I'd heard 1,000 times over 11 years. Only this time, I wasn't the reason for it. I couldn't hear what Rachel said next. A car drove by at exactly the wrong moment, drowning out a few seconds of conversation. Then I caught another sentence. "I just don't think Mark is the only option anymore." My stomach dropped. It honestly felt like someone had reached into my chest and unplugged something. Your brain does weird things in moments like that. Mine immediately started negotiating. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about something else. Maybe other options meant therapists, or vacation plans, or, I don't know, replacing me with a Labrador. I stood there for another few seconds, hoping, desperately hoping, that I'd hear something that would make all of this sound ridiculous. Something that would make me laugh at myself later. Instead, all I heard was more laughter. Then footsteps, heading toward the side gate. I quickly grabbed the grocery bag I'd dropped and hurried toward the front door before either of them rounded the corner. By the time Rachel walked inside a minute later, I was already in the kitchen, pretending to be fascinated by the nutritional information on a box of cereal. "Oh," she said with a smile. "You're home early." "Yeah. Everything okay?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The same woman I'd kissed goodbye that morning. The same woman I'd spent 11 years building a life with. She looked exactly the same, which somehow made it worse. "Everything's fine," I said. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't sure if either of us was telling the truth. The weird thing about hearing something that shatters your entire reality isn't the panic. It's the silence afterward. Rachel unpacked groceries with me like nothing had happened. She held up a carton of eggs. "Brown or white next time?" she asked. I actually stared at her for a second. "Brown or white?" "Lady, 5 minutes ago I accidentally overheard you shopping for a replacement husband, and now we're holding a board meeting about poultry." Whichever's cheaper," she nodded. "Good. The brown ones were on sale." Fantastic. Our marriage was apparently ending, but at least we were saving $2 on eggs. That night we ordered Thai food. We watched 2 episodes of some detective show. Rachel laughed at the sarcastic detective. I laughed too, mostly because it felt less awkward than saying, "Hey, funny story. Earlier today I heard you tell Linda you wanted to replace me." People always imagine betrayal coming with dramatic music. It doesn't. Sometimes it comes with spring rolls. When we went to bed, Rachel fell asleep in what had to be under 3 minutes. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Maybe I'd misunderstood. That thought became my emotional support animal. I repeated it over and over. Maybe they weren't talking about marriage. Maybe Linda had asked something weird. Maybe Rachel had been joking. Maybe... The problem with maybe is that your brain eventually starts asking another question. Then why didn't you just ask her? Simple. Because I was scared of the answer. People love saying, communication is the key to every relationship. Sure. Unless the answer is, yeah, I've been emotionally checking out of this marriage for months. Then communication suddenly feels less exciting. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Rachel kissed me goodbye before leaving. She texted me around lunchtime. "Don't forget we're having dinner with your parents Saturday." Heart emoji included. That's what really messed with me. Heart emoji. How do you tell your husband you love him at noon if you're apparently interviewing his replacement by dinner? I spent the next couple of days trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Unfortunately, reality started fighting back. Little things, tiny things. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they started forming a picture. Rachel suddenly became extremely protective of her phone. Now, she'd never left it lying around carelessly before, but this was different. If she got a notification while cooking, she'd wipe her hands immediately before picking it up. If I walked behind the couch while she was scrolling, the screen tilted away almost automatically. Not dramatically, smoothly, like muscle memory. One evening, I sat beside her while she was texting. The second I leaned back, her thumb hit the home button. Conversation gone. "Who are you talking to?" I asked casually. "My cousin." "Emily?" "No." A tiny pause. "Sarah." Interesting. She only had one cousin named Sarah. And she'd spent the last 10 years complaining that Sarah never answered texts. Apparently, Sarah had undergone a miraculous personality transformation. I'd notice when she smiled at her phone. I'd subconsciously count how long she stayed in the bathroom. I hated that version of myself. I'd always been one of those guys who laughed at husbands secretly checking locations or reading text messages. Either trust your wife or leave, I'd tell people. Look at me now. One overheard conversation later, and I was mentally timing bathroom visits like an FBI surveillance team. Life comes at you fast. Then came Thursday. Rachel left for the gym around 6. Nothing unusual, except she'd forgotten something. Her iPad. It was sitting on the coffee table, face up, charging. I noticed it because the screen lit up with a notification. It disappeared before I could read it. I looked away immediately, then looked back, then looked away again. I actually argued with myself out loud. No, I shook my head. Don't be that guy. I walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, closed it, walked back. The iPad was still there, completely innocent, completely silent, almost mocking me. I told myself I trusted my wife. Then another voice answered, "Did you?" Because if you trusted her, why was your heart still racing every time you remembered what she'd said to Linda? I stared at the tablet for what felt like an hour. It was probably 30 seconds, maybe less. Finally, I took a deep breath. I just need to know whether I'm losing my mind, I whispered. I wasn't looking for proof she'd cheated. I wasn't even looking for evidence of anything. I just wanted one thing: to find out whether the conversation I'd overheard had been exactly what it sounded like, or whether I was about to become the biggest idiot in America for doubting the woman I'd loved for 11 years. I wish I could tell you I walked away, that I chose trust, that I was the bigger person. I didn't. I picked up the iPad. My hands were actually shaking because I was terrified of what I might find. Rachel and I had always known each other's passcodes, not as some romantic, we have no secrets gesture, more out of convenience. Can you answer that text while I'm driving? Can you order pizza? Can you check the weather? It was one of those little marriage things you never really think about. Until you do. I typed in the code. The screen unlocked. For one brief, beautiful second, everything looked perfectly normal. Photos, calendar, streaming apps, recipe apps she downloaded and used exactly once. I almost laughed at myself. See? You're an idiot, Mark. Congratulations. You've officially become one of those paranoid husbands who deserve to get roasted on Reddit. I was literally about to lock the screen when something caught my eye. Safari. Normally I would have ignored it. Instead, I opened it. No particular reason. Just curiosity. The browser opened to a blank page. History cleared. Completely. That was odd. Rachel wasn't the kind of person who cleared browser history. She wasn't 80 years old trying to hide that she'd accidentally Googled Facebook.com. She barely knew browser history existed. I frowned. Then I tapped the address bar. Autofill dropped down. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I read the suggestions. Hinge.com, Bumble.com, Tinder.com. I stared at the screen. No way. These sites don't magically appear. Your browser remembers places you visited. My stomach tightened. I could still back out. Close the browser. Pretend I'd never seen any of it. Instead, I tapped Hinge. The website loaded. For a second I thought I'd hit a login screen. Instead, it opened directly to an account. Rachel's account. I recognized the profile picture instantly. I'd taken it. Last fall, we'd gone to a small winery with some friends. She'd laughed because a bee kept following her around. I'd snapped the photo at exactly the right moment. She looked beautiful, apparently beautiful enough to advertise herself to strangers. I couldn't breathe. Maybe it was an old account. People forget old accounts all the time. I clung to that idea like a drowning man grabbing floating debris. Then I noticed the little green dot beside her profile picture. Active now. I actually whispered the words out loud. No. My finger trembled as I opened her profile. There she was. Age, height, interests, favorite weekend activity. Looking for someone emotionally mature who loves good conversation and spontaneous adventures. Emotionally mature. Interesting choice. I wasn't sure I qualified. Then I kept reading. Life's too short to wonder, what if? That sentence hit harder than I expected, because suddenly I remembered the conversation with Linda. I think it's time I started looking at other options besides my husband. She hadn't been speaking metaphorically. She'd meant exactly what she'd said. I sat down on the couch because my knees suddenly felt unreliable. The room had gone strangely quiet. You know that feeling after a power outage? Everything technically still exists, but something essential is missing. That's exactly how it felt. I should have closed the app. Any reasonably intelligent person would have stopped there. Instead, I made the mistake every betrayed spouse eventually makes. I opened the messages. The first conversation wasn't explicit, just flirting. Lots of smiling emojis. A joke about pineapple on pizza. Another guy asking what kind of music she liked. Nothing that crosses the line. Almost worse, because it looked natural, comfortable, like she genuinely enjoyed talking to him. I opened another chat, then another, then another. There weren't 2 conversations, or 5. There were dozens. Some had only lasted a day. Some had gone on for weeks. Some men disappeared. Some she ghosted. Some ghosted her. It looked less like someone who'd made one terrible mistake, and more like someone browsing a very expensive online store, comparing, evaluating, keeping options open. Then I noticed something else. Most of the conversations had one thing in common. She usually sent the first message. That hurt more than I expected. She wasn't just responding to attention. She was looking for it. Actively. Intentionally. One message made my chest tighten. A man had asked what brought her to Hinge. Rachel replied, "I guess I'm starting to realize I settled too early." I read it once, then again, then a third time. Settled. For 11 years, I'd thought we were building a life together. To her, I was settling. Like buying the first house you toured because you were too tired to keep looking. Or choosing a restaurant because the parking lot wasn't full. Another man asked if she was married. There was a long pause in the timestamps. Nearly 6 hours. Then Rachel finally answered. "It's complicated." Complicated. That was apparently what 11 years together had become. Not marriage, not commitment. Complicated. I leaned back against the couch and covered my face with both hands. I was empty. Like someone had quietly removed every piece of furniture from my life while I wasn't paying attention. And the worst part? I still hadn't found a single message proving she'd actually met any of these men. No hotel reservations, no addresses, no pictures together, no obvious affair. Just page after page of conversations with strangers, while every morning she kissed me goodbye, and every night she climbed into bed beside me as if nothing had changed. I don't know how long I sat there. 5 minutes, maybe 30. Time gets weird when your marriage quietly explodes in your living room. Eventually, I forced myself to keep reading. At that point, I wasn't looking for more reasons to leave. I already had enough. I was looking for answers. There had to be someone. One guy she liked more than the others. One conversation that explained everything. Instead, I found something even stranger. Every conversation followed almost the same pattern. She'd match with someone. They'd joke around, talk about work, movies, travel, favorite restaurants. Then the guy would eventually say something like, "So, want to grab coffee this weekend?" And Rachel would dodge it. "Maybe. This week's crazy." Or, "I'll let you know." Or, "Rain check?" Sometimes she'd stop replying altogether. Other times she'd disappear for a week and suddenly come back like nothing had happened. It happened over and over and over again. I clicked through nearly 20 conversations. Same ending, different men, no dates, no dinner reservations, no hotel rooms, nothing. If she'd actually cheated, she was doing an incredible job hiding it. Or, she never crossed that line. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. In some twisted way, it almost made it worse, because it meant she wasn't looking for one specific man. She was looking for possibility. The feeling that if she ever decided to leave, there were plenty of doors waiting to open. I remembered something she'd once said years earlier while we were watching House Hunters. "If I ever buy another house," she'd laughed, "I'm touring at least 20 before choosing." Turns out she'd eventually applied the same strategy to husbands. I kept scrolling. One conversation caught my attention because it was unusually long. The guy's name was Daniel, 41, divorced. They'd been talking for almost 3 months, not every day, but consistently. "Daniel, you're funny. I honestly don't get why you're still single." Rachel answered with a laughing emoji. Then, "Technically I'm not." My jaw tightened. Daniel replied almost immediately, "That sounds like a story." Let's just say I've been wondering whether I chose comfort instead of happiness. I stopped reading. I physically couldn't continue for a moment. Comfort. That's what I'd become. Comfort. Not her husband, not her best friend. Comfort. Like an old sweatshirt you eventually replace because it doesn't look good anymore. I laughed. Actually laughed. A short, bitter little laugh. Well, I muttered to the empty living room. At least I'm comfortable. The silence didn't find that joke nearly as funny as I did. I put the iPad down and walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, stared inside, closed it, opened it again. I poured myself a glass of water. My hand was shaking enough that I spilled some on the counter. As I wiped it up, something hit me. Rachel would be home in less than an hour. She'd walk through that front door, smile, probably ask what I wanted for dinner, maybe kiss me on the cheek, and she'd have absolutely no idea that I now knew about the dozens of conversations she'd been having behind my back. I considered confronting her immediately. I even rehearsed it. Who's Daniel? Too aggressive. Why are you on Hinge? Too obvious. How long have you been shopping for my replacement? Okay. That one was admittedly pretty good. But anger has terrible timing. If I exploded now, I'd learn almost nothing. She'd deny it, cry, say it wasn't what it looked like, delete everything, and I'd never know how deep this really went. So I did something I'd never imagined myself doing. I put the iPad exactly where I'd found it. Same angle. Then I sat down on the couch and waited. About 45 minutes later, I heard her car pull into the driveway. My heart immediately started pounding. The front door opened. "Hey!" Rachel called. "I'm home!" I looked up from the TV. "Hey!" She walked into the living room carrying a gym bag, hair in a ponytail, face slightly flushed. She smiled. "How was your day?" I looked directly into the eyes of the woman who'd spent months telling strangers online that she'd settled for me. "It was interesting." She laughed. "That's mysterious. You know me." She walked over, leaned down, and kissed me on the forehead. A completely natural gesture, one she'd probably done 1,000 times. Then she noticed the iPad. "Oh, thank God." "What? I thought I'd left this somewhere." "You left it here." She smiled. "I would have lost my head if it wasn't attached." "No, just your conscience." I almost said it. The words made it all the way to my tongue. Then I swallowed them. Instead, I smiled back. "Yeah." She picked up the iPad, unlocked it. For one terrifying second, I thought she might somehow notice. Maybe an app still open, maybe something out of place. Instead, she casually checked a notification, locked the screen again, and walked toward the bedroom. "I'll shower really quick," she said. As soon as she disappeared down the hallway, I realized something. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was investigating. And somehow, that scared me almost as much as what I'd found on that iPad. For the next 4 days, I became an actor. Apparently, I was pretty good at it. I laughed at the right moments, asked Rachel how her day had been, watched movies with her, complained about gas prices. The strange thing was, Rachel didn't seem nervous. She wasn't acting like someone afraid of getting caught. If anything, she seemed happier than she'd been in months. She hummed while making breakfast, started working out more consistently, even suggested we take a weekend trip sometime. "You know," she said one evening, "just the two of us." I almost choked on my coffee. The two of us? Interesting strategy. Window shopping for a new husband while planning a romantic getaway with the current model. Every night after she fell asleep, I'd lie awake trying to understand what exactly I was grieving. Had she cheated? Maybe not. Did she want to? I wasn't sure. But one thing became impossible to ignore. She was emotionally investing in other men while emotionally withdrawing from me. People always argue about where cheating begins. I don't know the answer, but I do know this. If your wife is telling strangers online that marrying you was settling, you're already standing in the wreckage of something. You just haven't admitted it yet. By Tuesday morning, I needed fresh air. Not because it would magically fix anything. Mostly because I was tired of feeling like every wall in my own house knew something I didn't. I was mowing the front lawn when Linda wandered over. Of course she did. If curiosity were an Olympic sport, Linda would have had more gold medals than Michael Phelps. She leaned against the fence with a coffee mug in one hand. "Morning, Mark." "Morning." She watched me finish a pass with the mower. "Looks good." "Thanks." Silence. I figured that was the end of the conversation. I underestimated Linda. She waited exactly 7 seconds before speaking again. "So, Rachel seems happier lately?" I forced a smile. "Yeah?" "Oh, definitely." I shrugged. "I guess." Linda nodded thoughtfully. "You know, sometimes people just need to realize they have choices." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She took another sip of coffee. "I mean, nobody should stay somewhere just because it's familiar." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. Was she fishing? Testing me? Did she know I'd overheard them? I decided to gamble. "I suppose," Linda smiled. "You've taken all of this surprisingly well." Every muscle in my body froze. "Taken what well?" She blinked, then frowned slightly. "Oh." There was a pause. A long one. The kind where both people suddenly realize they are not talking about the same conversation. Linda's expression changed almost instantly. "Oh." She looked genuinely uncomfortable. She glanced toward our house, then back at me. "I thought—" She stopped herself. "I honestly thought Rachel had already talked to you." My heartbeat was suddenly loud enough to hear. "Talk to me about what?" Linda looked like she wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. "Oh, Mark, I really shouldn't be the one saying anything. That sentence has never been followed by good news." I shut off the lawnmower. The sudden silence between us felt enormous. "Linda." She looked at me for several seconds. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I just—" Another pause. "I honestly thought the two of you were already dealing with it." "Dealing with what?" She lowered her voice. "Rachel's been talking for a while now about seeing what else is out there." There it was. Not one bad day, not a joke, not something I'd misunderstood. "She said," Linda continued carefully, "she wasn't sure you were the person she wanted to spend the rest of her life with." I couldn't say anything. Linda kept talking, almost nervously. "I told her not to rush into anything." "You did?" "Of course. I'm not a monster. I told her if she was unhappy, she needed to either work on the marriage or leave it." She hesitated. "But she kept saying she wanted to know whether there was someone better suited for her." Better suited. Like she was shopping for shoes, or a mattress, or a new SUV. I stared across the street without really seeing anything. Cars passed. A kid rode by on a bicycle. Somewhere a dog barked. The entire neighborhood kept moving, while my marriage quietly stopped. Linda shifted awkwardly. "I'm really sorry." I finally looked at her. "How long?" She answered almost immediately. "I don't know exactly." She thought for a second. "Maybe 4 or 5 months?" 4 or 5 months of smiling at me, laughing with me, planning weekends, saying, "I love you," and somewhere in the middle of all that, quietly interviewing my replacements. Linda looked like she regretted every word she'd said. "I shouldn't have assumed you knew." "No," I said quietly. "You shouldn't have." She nodded once, then slowly walked back toward her house, leaving me standing beside a silent lawnmower. I didn't even remember why I'd come outside anymore. I only knew one thing. The messages on the dating apps hadn't been a moment of weakness. They were the result of a decision she'd made months ago. And somehow, that realization hurt even more than the flirting itself. After my conversation with Linda, something changed. Before, I still had questions. Now, I had answers. Not all of them, but enough. Rachel hadn't created those dating profiles on a whim. She'd been mentally leaving our marriage for months. She just hadn't bothered to tell me. That night, she asked if I wanted tacos. I almost laughed. Sure, she smiled. Chicken or beef? I don't care. That was the first honest thing I'd said all week. Over dinner, she talked about a new coffee shop she'd found. I nodded. She complained about gas prices. I nodded again. Then she looked at me. Are you okay? I forced a smile. Just tired. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I love you. For a second, I almost believed her. Almost. When she went upstairs later that night, I opened my laptop. Not to spy, to prepare. I spent 2 hours reading about divorce laws in my state, how assets were divided, what financial records I'd need, whether screenshots of dating profiles mattered. The more I read, the calmer I became. For the first time in days, I felt like I was actually doing something instead of drowning. The next morning, while Rachel was in the shower, I quietly copied everything from her dating accounts onto a flash drive. Every profile, every message. Then I uploaded another copy to cloud storage. If she deleted everything tomorrow, it wouldn't matter. I'd already seen enough. One afternoon, I decided to test something. As casually as possible, I asked, "Hey, if you could go back in time, would you still marry me?" She looked surprised. That's random. I know, she shrugged. I don't know. That wasn't the answer. That was the entire answer. Not, of course. Not, absolutely. Not even a joking, depends on the day. Just, I don't know. She smiled awkwardly. What made you ask? I smiled back. No reason. That evening, I called a divorce attorney. The consultation was scheduled for Friday morning. I didn't tell Rachel. Not yet. I wanted to hear one more thing from her before I ended 11 years of marriage. I wanted to know whether she was ever going to tell me herself, or whether she planned to keep looking for my replacement until she found someone she liked better. Friday morning, I met with the attorney. The conversation lasted less than an hour. When I walked out of his office, I wasn't angry anymore. I had a plan. Over the weekend, I quietly gathered everything I needed. Bank statements, tax returns, insurance documents, the deed to the house. I opened a separate checking account in my name and moved only the money my attorney told me I legally could. I wasn't trying to punish Rachel. I was trying to protect myself. Monday evening, she came home carrying takeout. I got your favorite, she said with a smile. I looked at the bag. Thai food. Funny. The last time we'd eaten Thai was the night after I'd overheard her conversation with Linda. She had no idea how much had changed since then. We ate dinner, talked about nothing. When she finished, I stood up. I need to show you something. She looked confused but followed me into the living room. I handed her a folder. What's this? Open it. She pulled out the first page, then the second, then the screenshots, her dating profile, her messages, the conversation where she wrote, I guess I'm starting to realize I settled too early. Another one. I've been wondering if I chose comfort instead of happiness. The color drained from her face. She looked at me. Mark. I didn't say anything. She flipped through more pages. I can explain. She swallowed. It wasn't what it looks like. I couldn't help smiling. I've heard people say that in movies. I never met any of them. I know. She blinked. You know? I read everything. Tears filled her eyes. I was just talking. You were shopping. You were looking for someone better while keeping me as your backup plan. Her shoulders dropped. I was confused. For 5 months? She didn't answer. I never cheated. I never crossed that line. You would've. Her head snapped up. No. You just hadn't found the right guy yet. Silence. That silence answered more than any words could. Finally, she whispered, I didn't think you'd ever find out. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Rachel? That's the part you decided to say out loud? She covered her face. I'm sorry. We can fix this. I slowly shook my head. No. Please. You know what hurts the most? She waited. It isn't the dating apps. It isn't the flirting. It isn't even those messages. It's the fact that every single morning you kissed me goodbye, while wondering whether someone else might be a better deal. She started crying. I made a mistake. I nodded. You made hundreds. I slid one final document across the coffee table. She looked down. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her hands began to shake. You're divorcing me? No. I stood up. You divorced us months ago. I'm just handling the paperwork. She kept crying as I walked toward the front door. Where are you going? My brother's place. Please don't leave. I stopped for a moment. Without turning around, I said, You remember what you told Linda? Silence. I think it's time I started looking at other options. More silence. I figured I'd help you out. Then I opened the door and walked away. Our divorce was finalized 8 months later. Rachel sent several long emails. She apologized. She admitted she'd been addicted to the attention. She said she never intended to leave me. She said the dating apps were just fantasy. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe not. Honestly, it stopped mattering. Because here's what I learned. People think betrayal starts when someone gets into another person's bed. Sometimes it starts much earlier. Sometimes it starts the moment your partner begins quietly wondering if there's someone better waiting around the corner. By the time they start looking, the relationship is already halfway over. They just haven't had the courage to tell you yet. Ironically, life has a twisted sense of humor. About a year after the divorce, a couple of friends finally convinced me to try online dating. I laughed at the idea. The same kind of app that helped destroy my marriage was now supposed to help rebuild my life. It sounded ridiculous, but I gave it a shot anyway. A week later, I matched with a woman named Emma. Our first date lasted almost 5 hours. The second one lasted even longer. There were no games, no mixed signals, no backup plans, and no wondering whether one of us was secretly browsing for someone better while the other was paying for dinner. 3 years later, Emma became my wife. Sometimes we joke about how we met. She'll smile and say, I still can't believe we met on a dating app. And I always answer the same way. Me neither. It's funny. Rachel used those apps looking for someone better than her husband. I used one after my divorce, and somehow found the woman who became the best thing that ever happened to me. Life really does have a strange sense of humor. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.